you're right in front of me.
Nice. Is that in alignment with your desires for right now?
Oh. I didn't have a desire. It was just really a noticing. I didn't have like a desire or
Okay.
non-desire.
Sweet. Nice. Just observing without evaluating.
Yeah. Unusual.
Nice. That's unusual for you?
Oh, God.
Really? Nice. Well, Daniel, I assume you're ready. You
Yep.
always are.
We're rolling.
Nice. So today I would like to share with you my journey of awakening and stepping out of the life that I was living, which was one of incredible destruction to the earth, destruction to people, and to the plants and animals we share this home with, that at the time felt totally normal and really wonderful. And what led me to today, living a radically different life from that, one that is focused on living in harmony with the earth and, to the best of my ability, in harmony with humanity and with the plants and animals that we share this home with. So I'd like to just tell you, to start, a little bit about where I came from, to give you a bit of a backstory. How does that sound to all of you?
Okay.
Nice. So I grew up in northern Wisconsin on Lake Superior. I was born to my mother, Cheryl Greenfield, and my dad, who I just called Mark. And we grew up in a small town in northern Wisconsin. And as a young kid, I generally struggled with feeling like an outsider. We were very low income. My mom made, there were 4 kids from 3 dads, and my mom made about less than $20,000 a year. We also got a lot of support from the government, as well as my mom's sister and her dad. But so we were very low income. My dad wasn't around. We were Jewish in a town that was almost all Christian or Catholic. And my parents were hippies too. So in so many ways, I felt like an outsider. And as a young person, I just really wanted to belong. I just really wanted to be loved, to be acknowledged, to be accepted, to be seen and heard. And so much of my younger childhood was focused around that. And what I saw as normal was having a nice house, having a shiny car, having a nuclear family. And I remember going over to my friends' houses, and hello to everyone out there in the internet world on the camera. We're gonna treat you just like you're here with us. There's a small group of us, and you're here. I'm here, you're here we are. And on this camera as well. So I would go over to my friends' houses, and they had, all this plastic Tupperware. And I thought, plastic Tupperware, that's what the normal people use. And my mom had glass jars. Our food was stored in glass jars. And I was just looking at all the things that my friends did that had more money than me. And that's what I gravitated towards. I wanted to be normal, basically. And so that became a large focus of my younger years. And that continued through middle school, high school, into university. At the same time, I loved the earth. I was spending so much of my time outside, catching frogs and turtles, fishing, learning about animals. I was absolutely just in love with the earth. And so when I went to university, I studied biology with a concentration in aquatic science. So that love for the earth was still very much there, as was the love for money, because money was how I could be accepted, how I could be loved. And when I got to university, my focus was not so much on the studying. Really, my focus was on binge drinking. I went to a university where it was all about the red Solo cup. Like, that was the new, normal. To be drinking from a red Solo cup, that was the cool thing. So drinking lots of whatever cheap beer and cheap vodka. And then also, I spent a lot of my time pursuing women. because I had learned that the measure of a man from the society that I had learned a lot from was in the number of women that he was sleeping with and the physical beauty of the women that he was sleeping with. And so I was pursuing the same thing that most people are, to be loved, to be accepted, to have a sense of belonging. And for me, during college, that really came through partying with my peers, through pursuing sex and having sex, and through money as well. So freshman year of college, I was recruited to sell educational books door to door. And actually I worked in Burbank, California, like a few miles from here. And I would work between 84 and 90 hours a week, knocking on doors, selling books. And I made in my first summer about $18,000 between my freshman and sophomore year, which for me was a lot of money in one summer, in 3 months of working very hard. And I learned that actually I could through the skill set of sales, I could actually make a lot of money, and instead of being a biologist, I could just do sales and work for a short period of the year, and rather than working in nature, just spend a lot of my time in nature when I wasn't working. And so that's what I did through university, is I did that all of my summers, selling educational books door to door. And I really was enjoying it. I was reading books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I was investing in my future, maxing out my 401 or my Roth IRAs, and I had investments in like mutual or life insurance, for example. And so I was very focused in this financial freedom aspect of living. And after university, towards the end of university, I started to sell advertising to businesses. So I started to work as an independent contractor selling advertising at grocery stores on the shopping carts and the register tape receipts. And shortly after college, I moved out to San Diego, California in 2011, so 13 years ago. And I joined a marketing company, and after 6 months started my own marketing company. And at that time, I was about 25 years old. I set a goal of being a millionaire by the time I was 30, and very quickly was on path for that goal of being a millionaire by the time I was 30. I was bringing in over 6 figures a year. At the peak of the company, had about 20 independent contractors out selling advertising. I was enjoying life. I was in San Diego, a Wisconsin boy, living 3 blocks from the beach. I had friends, I had romantic relationships. I was traveling the world, which I had been doing in the years prior. I was continuing to explore the world, explore myself. And I was happy, and I was healthy, and I was thriving, I would say. Like, I was really, really where I wanted to be in life. And then something happened, and I realized I want to say had to, but I didn't have to, but I chose to radically transform my life. I realized that I wanted to do things totally differently from the way that I was. And what happened is I started to watch a lot of documentaries and read books, and I realized that the way that I was living was causing incredible destruction to people, to the plants and animals we share this earth with, and to the planet as a whole. Everything that I was doing was a part of systems of extraction, of exploitation, of injustice, of inequity. The food that I was eating, with every bite I was taking, I was consuming a part of the planet. The car I was driving and the gas that I was pumping into the car, the stuff that I was buying, mostly cheap stuff from Walmart at the time, the trash that I was creating that was, being buried in holes that we call landfills. Other people call it organized littering. The money that I was spending, every dollar I was spending was part of this monetary system that has so much destruction in it. The investments that I had, the bank account that I had, even the water that I was drinking was being pumped across the desert and was running the Colorado River dry. So, even the natural, the hygiene products that I was putting on, my deodorant, my shampoo was part of destruction, my cleaning products in my home, the entertainment I was watching on TV, the alcohol that I was drinking at the bars, it was all parts of systems of destruction. And I learned that the reason I was doing a lot of what I was doing was just because society had kind of told me to do it. I had been watching movies and reading magazines and watching commercials, and I realized that a lot of what I was doing was just because that's what I had seen on TV or I had seen other people doing. My Old Spice deodorant, why was I wearing it? Well, because Old Spice had pretty good commercials, for me. It was the commercials, and ultimately what they had was multi-million-dollar advertising budgets, and they had penetrated deep into my mind to believe that I needed them. And so I decided I was going to take my life back from the destruction, back from the corruption and the lies, and back from, I would say a lot of it was a realization of corporate control, that I was not in control of my own life. That the corporations and that in many ways government agendas and just societal norms and structures were in charge of my life. And I decided I was going to take my life back just one step at a time. So what I did, and during this, a lot of people, if you learn that almost everything that you're doing is not in alignment with your belief system, you might feel some doom and gloom, some overwhelm, some depression. How many of you have experienced that at some time? Some of that? Yeah. So you can relate. And so I definitely felt some of that. But these documentaries that I was watching, these books that I was reading, The Story of Stuff is an example. That was a really powerful short film series that they didn't just tell me the problems that existed in the world. They also shared solutions. And so what I decided is that I was going to be a part of the solution. I learned that I was a hypocrite, plain and simple. My actions were not in alignment with my beliefs. I didn't believe in destroying the world. I didn't believe in children in slave labor making my clothes or people in prison making my clothes. I didn't believe in dumping my toxic fluids into the ocean or into low-income communities. I didn't believe in doing any of this, but now I knew that I was, and I realized I was a hypocrite. So what I did is I made a list of changes that I wanted to make, and I decided I was going to make at least one positive change per week for 2 years. So if you make one change per week for 2 years, that's 104 changes. So that's what I set out to do. For my food, for example, I stopped buying my food at Walmart and started to buy local food. Started to eventually go to the local farmers market and go to the food co-op. I started to buy unpackaged food instead of getting everything in plastic. Simple things like started carrying reusable grocery bags to the store. I started to eat a lot more whole foods, a lot less processed foods. So, instead of boxes of rice-a-roni, just brown rice, for example. A lot more fresh produce, lots of fruits and vegetables, for example. I started to look at everything that I was putting into my garbage can and say, how can I do this in a way that doesn't create garbage? So anything that was single use, I found reusable, long-term use alternatives. So ditching bottled water. At the time I used paper towels and I switched to reusable, washable towels instead. Saran wrap or tin foil, instead just using reusable containers. I got a simple water purifier to attach to my faucet so that I didn't need bottled water, for example. Instead of throwing my food scraps into the garbage can, I started to compost and turn my food scraps into compost. I started to grow a little bit of my own food. I found a bookshelf in the alley and filled that up with soil, laid it down flat, filled it up with soil, and started to grow just a little bit of food, some greens and some herbs. I started to ride my bike more and drive the car less. I started to use cash instead of credit cards, and started to shop local instead of buying things. Online really wasn't so much of a thing then, but Walmart was, so, less Walmart, more local. And so I was making lots of small changes. I ditched all of the hygiene items that I had that had toxic chemicals in them. And some people out there in the internet world will be like, toxic? What do you mean toxic? Well, I mean ingredients that you read and you have no idea what they are. They're derived with chemical byproducts, with fossil fuel byproducts, stuff that's just like, why would I want this on or in my body? And so I ditched all of that and started using natural personal hygiene items, or just said, you know what, deodorant, for example. Maybe the armpits are designed to sweat. Maybe I'll let the sweat out. And maybe it's okay to smell a little bit. Like, animals smell. I'm an animal. I don't want to have this wafting, stench, but it's okay if I smell a little bit. I don't need to mask that. And started to swim in the ocean more and shower less, just so many different changes. I was focused on food, water, energy, waste, and transportation. These are what I consider to be sort of the 5 key pillars of personal sustainable living. And then money as well. And so lots of small changes, but I also started to make some big changes too. Within a year, I got rid of my car, and I used an electric car share program when I did need a car, or I just rode my bike. I made one radical change that I made early on is after just about a year or two, maybe around a year, I actually chose to get a vasectomy, knowing that I didn't want to have children. Not because of the environmental reason, because I believe you can raise children in a way that is sustainable and beneficial to the earth, but because at the same time as I was doing all of this, I was formulating who I really wanted to be. And I knew that it wasn't a father of an individual child, and rather it was that I wanted to be a servant to the larger picture of humanity. And that the way that I could do that was by having freedom and autonomy. And also knowing that I was formulating the belief that I wanted to be able to use my life in a bold way that I could do much more easily if I didn't have people that were dependent upon me. So I was making these personal changes, but I was also from that time at the age of 25, 26, formulating my long-term plan of being an activist, a human being who's dedicating his whole entire life, the decades ahead, to this desire to contribute to Earth and to the life that's upon this Earth. And so other things, that were some of the bigger things was it took me a few years, but I got rid of all of my credit cards and had no more credit cards. I took all my money out of my investments after just about a year, so my life savings, took that all out of that because I learned that it was invested in fossil fuels and cigarettes, and I didn't want to invest in that. Did you see that?
Yeah, I've been eyeballing.
A little gopher popping up right here next to us.
There he is.
Hello, gopher.
Cleaning its
Oh.
hole, maybe.
Thank you for gracing us with your presence. So a lot of it was just that. I wanted to be connected to the earth, and I was shedding so much. So I was shedding my ties to the financial system, canceling as many bills as possible, taking my money out of investments that were parts of destruction, out of the big banks, and drastically simplifying my life. So I was going through my stuff and asking, do I really need this? Does this really add value to my life? And I was in a 3-bedroom apartment, and I went from the biggest room in the apartment to living in the 6x6 closet. of the apartment and renting out the rooms so that I could live rent-free in the apartment that I had. And so I was downsizing and simplifying. I think I had gotten rid of my car, which meant I no longer had a trunk to put stuff in, and I realized that really changed things when I could only put what I had on my bicycle. And then along with that, the clothes, just shedding my huge closet full of clothes. And so there's so many things. I was making so many different changes. In 2013, so about a year and a half after I started making all these changes, I had probably made around 100 changes at that time. So imagine this. Imagine if you woke up and tomorrow you were doing 100 things differently from today. You might smell different, your friends might be different, your food's different, your cleaning products in your house are different, your hobbies are different, what media you're taking in might be different. You might look at yourself and be like, who am I? You might not even recognize yourself. But by taking it one step at a time, I was able to gradually yet rapidly radically transform my life. So I started practicing traveling with no money as I was demonetizing my life. That was some of my first adventures, as I'd travel far away, at first with just a little bit of money and then with no money. So one of my first adventures was to land in Cabo, Mexico with no money, with just the clothes in my back and at the time my cell phone on airplane mode, and had to get back to the United States with no money. That way I had to really test my philosophy of, can I live without money? And it also forced me to deepen my connection with humanity, to have these deep interactions. By being dependent on others, I actually needed to facilitate deeper connections. And then in 2013, I set out on my first environmental adventure. This is when I decided I changed my life title from business owner, or basically salesperson, business owner, to environmental activist. Actually, at the time, it was a professional adventurer is what I decided that I would be. And then it shifted to environmental adventures and environmental activism. So my first campaign was to bike across the United States on a bicycle made out of bamboo and try to have no negative environmental impact. By doing this, I could cross the country living out my beliefs of sustainability to the extreme, practicing to the extreme in all the pillars: food, water, energy, waste, transportation, to cross the country on bicycle, 4,700 miles, trying to have no negative impact, paying attention to every single action that I was taking. Every action that I was taking, to the point where I could not walk into a store that used automatic doors. I had to wait till someone else would walk in and then hop in with them. No using a faucet or even a flush toilet. I even remember passing by an automatic light and then at night and then stopping and unscrewing the bulb so that the light wouldn't be on because of my behalf. I was paying attention to every facet of how my life interacted with the world. And in doing so, I brought others on this adventure with me. What I started to do is I would ride my bike right up to the newspapers and the news stations. And the first one I think was in Kansas or Nebraska, and I'd said, "Hi, I'm biking across the country. I've got a bamboo bicycle outside the station with a trailer covered in solar panels, and I'm biking across the country for sustainability. Would you like to do a story?" And every time they would say, "Yeah, that sounds interesting." And so I was able to start spreading the message of sustainability wherever I was, Nebraska or Kansas, Chicago or New York City. And that's when I found my voice as a messenger for the earth, a messenger for sustainable living. And so there was kind of two main facets. There was me deeply embracing and practicing, and then also being a teacher, being a messenger and sharing and deepening into both at the same time. My way of going about things was to take things to the extreme. Why? Because that's where I wanted to be. I realized that the way we were living is incredibly extreme. The United States has 5% of the world's population, yet we consume 25% of the world's resources. That by definition is extreme. So I decided to take things to the other end of the extreme. Extreme was kind of the only option, because if you don't go to the extreme, you continue to destroy and pillage. And I said, I'm not doing that anymore. So extreme was kind of my only option if I actually wanted to live sustainably. And then also because I found that if I took things to the extreme, that the media would cover it. It was these campaigns that I was able to create these packages that helped the media to be able to share this. So in 2014, I biked across the country again. This time I only ate food from dumpsters from the Mississippi River all the way to New York City. Only ate food that was going to waste. And in each of the major cities I passed through, I hosted food waste fiascos where I would get thousands of dollars worth of perfectly good food out of the grocery store dumpsters and set it up in these mandalas of food waste. And the media would come out and people would come out and people would say, what do you mean this is all from the dumpster? And I would teach about our globalized, industrialized food system and how food has become a commodity rather than a life-giving source, that it's dollars and cents on the spreadsheet. And it's all, the waste is all built into this global industrial food system. And then teach about the alternatives, growing your own food, foraging, buying from local farmers, joining a CSA, for example. In 2016, I set out on a campaign where instead of living out my beliefs, I did the opposite. For 1 month, I lived like the average person in the United States, eating, shopping, consuming, just like the average person does. But the catch was I had to wear every piece of trash that I created. The average person creates 4.5 pounds of trash per day, which is 135 pounds a month. So by the end of the month, I would potentially be wearing 135 pounds. My body weight was around 150 pounds, so an entire me, basically. And so I had to design a suit that could carry that. So I had a designer that took 160 hours to create a suit that had these clear, thick plastic pockets where I could distribute all of the trash throughout my body from feet to neck. And distribute, like the plastic forks here and the Starbucks cup here, so you could see all of the trash and people could look at it and see that's the same trash that they create. So I ate, shopped, consumed just like the average person. And by the end of the month, I was wearing 87 pounds of trash everywhere I went in New York City, riding the subway, trying to go to the movies, standing in line at Whole Foods, wherever I was wearing that trash, up to sometimes 12 hours a day. So this was the activism that really worked. I had media following me almost every day, sometimes doing up to 10 interviews in a day, sharing these messages. And so that's what I continued to do. Over the last decade, I've done probably around 15 or so major campaigns, and then continued to simplify my life. So in 2015, I moved into a 50 square foot tiny house, and everything that I owned fit into that tiny house. In 2016, I downsized to owning just 111 possessions, all that were in my backpack. And then in 2020, I downsized to just 44 possessions, all of which fit into a day pack. And then one of my other major campaigns was for 1 year, I tested to see if I could break completely free from the global industrial food system and grow and forage 100% of my food for a year. So for 1 year, down to the salt, the oil, the spices, the calories, the fat, the vitamins, supplements, everything I consumed, I had to either grow in my gardens or forage. And I did that in Orlando, Florida in 2019. And I came out of that year in the healthiest physical state that I had ever been in my adult life. I was thriving. I only fluctuated my weight by about 4 pounds while doing that. Whereas a lot, you could imagine, you could easily lose many pounds breaking free from all processed foods, no ice cream, any of that. So I was able to largely thrive just off the earth. And then the last part that I'll share is that it was back around 2015. That's when I first started to take my vows. I made a series of lifetime vows as well as some vows that I renew every 4 years. So I vowed for life to earning less than the federal poverty threshold, which right now is $15,000 a year, but when I made that it was around $11,000 a year. To never paying federal taxes, because our federal taxes go disproportionately to war, the military-industrial complex, police brutality, the prison systems, bailing out the big banks, the pharmaceutical industries, big ag, fossil fuels, and I said I'm not gonna pay for that. And so instead, I vowed to donating 100% of my media income for life to people doing the work, environmental activists, nonprofits, initiatives that are serving the people. Rather than contributing to war, serve the people who are most under-resourced in these systems of destruction and exploitation. And so I made these series of vows, and I've continued to do that. And right now I renew them every 4 years in alignment with the presidential cycle. So I just renewed my vows this year, a couple weeks ago. And this year it includes actually 4 years of practicing non-sexuality, so no sex or romance. And I've been doing that for the last 2 years already. And then actually, hello helicopter. And then actually I just committed to 4 years of telling only the truth and not telling a lie. So existing in a complete state of truth and transparency. So I've continued, I started this journey 14 years ago now, and you would think that with all that there wouldn't be much more to do. But what I've seen is that our lives are wrapped up in this huge web of destruction, or web of consumerism. We're here in the middle, and there's hundreds of strands that are tying us in, weaving us in. And it's a full-time job to break the strands of that web, to unravel that. And that's what my job has been, largely, to break each of those strands and to replace each of those strands with community, with connection, with love, with embracing that I'm a part of everything, breaking down the separation and embracing the interconnectedness with everything. And it continues to deepen, and it continues to deepen. A lot of what I'm doing today, I never could have imagined when I made my list of 100 changes that I wanted to make that I'd, be able to get to. But it was always the plan. I knew from the very beginning that I was gonna radically transform my life and use my life as a tool of service. And so there's certainly other things there's certainly other things in there, but that gives a little bit of a substantial summary of the journey of breaking free from the societal structures and societal norms, becoming myself, a human being who has a simple mission: to live in a way that doesn't destroy the very home we live on, and to really exist in a way that's actually beneficial. And that was the big thing for me a few years in that I realized. Instead of looking at life through the lens of, how does this make me look? Will people like me? Instead of looking at life through that lens, I started to look at life through the lens of, is this beneficial to the earth, my community, and myself? And if the answer was yes, go for it. That was my new lens for looking at the world. And what I found was that once I started doing that, most of the BS, it just could fall away. It could just shed away. I realized that mostly what was holding me back for so long was societal norms and societal structures. So much of this journey is a practice of just coming home to myself, loving myself, just being myself, and helping others to do so as well. And then the other big aspect is community. What this dominator society wants is fragmented communities. Not even community, just fragmented communities, fragmented cultures, fragmented individuals. Why? Because if we're broken up and we're fragmented, what do we need? Their money so we can buy their stuff, and we don't believe that we have it right here. So that's a big part of this, is just becoming whole and complete and finding a home within inside of ourselves. So on that note, I would love to take time to hear if any of you have questions, things that are alive in you. And for those of you out in the internet world, you are welcome to add your questions into the comment section, and there's a good chance that at some point when I'm back online, I'll answer some of those, or I'll have a teammate who will help answer some of those for you. So you're very welcome to, although I won't get them in this moment, you're very welcome to ask the questions as well. So yes, anything come to mind as far as any questions?
Big question I have is, there's understanding the choices we make and the things we consume as being harmful, and then there's the commitment to actually make a change. That's what I find so challenging and impressive. Of you set out to make a change once, one change every week for 2 years. Like, how did you bring yourself to a place to commit, to accept that truth that you came to of, I live a life of destruction?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things. I think my strategy was, what I started changing was the things that I was most excited about. So for example, I was excited to grow food. That wasn't hard. I wanted to grow food. I was excited to ride my bike. I was excited to get rid of my gym membership and get my exercise through being outside. I was excited to explore. I started to explore in new ways. I was exploring, having an aquaponic system at home, trying to raise tilapia and grow food at the same time, or have a black soldier fly larvae that would, when they come out of their egg, they hatch into, when the larva's ready, they climb, and they'll climb upstairs, and then if you set it up, they'll fall right into your aquaponics tank and feed your fish and make you fish to eat. So whatever I was excited about, that's what I did first. And so my strategy was, I was building the foundation one step at a time. And as I built each of these steps that I was excited about, then the other things that felt daunting became easier, because I had the foundation, I had the motivation, I had the inspiration, and I was able to build one thing at a time. So that's always my recommendation to people. Don't start with what you're feeling like doom and gloom about, or like you don't want to do. Figure it out. What is it that you really want to do, and start with that. And then also, don't start with the Herculean challenge. Start with small things that, one at a time, that are actually accomplishable. Another thing is, writing it down really helps. Having that goal list. What I did is I made a goal list and I put it in my kitchen. My kitchen was where my front door was. You walk right in there, and it was right on the wall. And I tied a string around a pen and taped that to the wall right next to that. So anybody who walked into my house, they saw whether I was making changes or not. That, before I had internet, before I had social media to keep me accountable, I had my list on my wall for everybody that came over to see. So that helped as well, having it be that. And then, of course, community. One of the big things is that I just transformed who I was spending time with. I found this guy Joshua Alivard and this guy Brian Blum. They were really passionate about sustainability, and there was this little sustainability club, and I started to go to that. And we started to go on little field trips, sustainability field trips. And so just every opportunity I had to be around people that would help me move into that direction. You know, like, you are your surroundings to a degree. You can ascend your surroundings, but if your surroundings are peace and wholesomeness, and then you're likely to begin to embody that. Whereas if your surroundings are chaos and destruction, you're likely to embody that. And so that was another big part about it. So those were some of my key ways that helped me to break that web of consumerism and weave together a new web of a more harmonious way of being. Does that provide some insight?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Other questions come to mind? And I'd like to mention with questions, there is no question that's off the table. As you know, I'm now living in 100% transparency. But secondly, sustainable living is everything. Sustainable living is our entire existence on Earth. So there's absolutely nothing that is outside of the realm of this that that I don't see as relevant to explore. Yeah.
I'm kind of wondering, do you feel committed to like stay in the United States, knowing that we're probably the most violent country on the planet?
Yeah. So the question is, do I feel committed to staying in the United States? Yes. Well, for one, 2 years ago I got rid of my last form of identification. So leaving the country entering other countries is kind of challenging right now, even if I want to. I actually lost my passport in 2022 here in Los Angeles, and then I composted my birth certificate a few weeks later. So I can travel internationally, and I would like to explore that, traveling internationally with no passport in the years ahead. But regardless, that's just a little side anecdote. Absolutely, I am dedicated to being here in service in the United States, and the reason why is that the roots of destruction that are, or the tentacles, let's say, of destruction that are wrapped around the world, the majority of them stem in Western consumerism and Western dominator government. So, just the fact of the number of dictatorships that the United States has installed in other countries when democratically elected democracies happen, and then the United States says, well, that's not the best for our oil interests, so we're going to topple that and place the political system that we want. That's just one example of how the United States of all countries is at the heart of the destruction globally. And so, and here, right here, sitting here in Los Angeles, the reason I'm doing this experiment of non-ownership here is because Hollywood culture, the movies, this place influences the world as much as anywhere else in the world. Like, there's not many places in the world that have as much or more influence than here. And so I'm dedicated to being here because I believe that if the United States doesn't change, then we will never have a sustainable future on Earth. And I'm also dedicated to being here because this is the society that I know. I can speak from a place of authority on this society because I've lived here for 38 years. I don't know everything about the society, of course, but I know the ins and outs fairly well of our corporate structures and our government systems to be able to speak from a place of authority on our baseline way of existing on this earth. And then also, as a person with a lot of privilege, I'm very hesitant about going and setting up in another country where I'm an outsider and I don't really know the culture and the situation as much. Now, I'm open to working in other countries if I'm invited to do so, without a doubt. But I fully believe that I'm most effective right here, and that my greatest impact can be by working here, changing things at the roots here, and having that spread out. Yeah. Thanks for asking that, Cheryl. Yeah.
You said that some documentaries started the process of your transformation.
Yeah.
Do you remember Any in particular, or what
Yeah.
the issues were they were talking about?
Yeah, I'd like to share those resources. So for the documentaries that changed my life, that's at robingreenfield.org/films. For the books, it's at robingreenfield.org/books. For the 100 changes that I made, those are listed at robingreenfield.org/100. And then my timeline, sharing my journey of change, is at robingreenfield.org/timeline. And with each change, for example, taking my money out of the big banks, you can click on that, and then it shares why I took my money out of the big banks. So when I said that what I just gave was a bit of a summary, it is a bit of a summary. If you go to my website and you follow all the links within this one thing, you have an incredibly large rabbit hole. And I know some of the people out there in the internet world right now, they've been in that rabbit hole. So as far as the films, you know, a really big one for me from the beginning, I mentioned the Story of Stuff earlier. That's a series of short films. That was huge. Zeitgeist actually was a really big one in teaching me about the truth behind our monetary system. Food Inc., about our food system, that was a really big one. Those were some of the earlier, really impactful ones that come most to mind. But there were, you know, a few dozen that were very impactful at the time, and those are the ones that come to mind the most at the moment. We got some deer over here.
Yeah. Oh.
Hello, deer, and some. Is that a raven or a crow? You'd say crow? Yeah, I was thinking crow too. Nice. Yeah. Other questions?
You said one of your vows for the next 4 years is to speak only truth. And I'm curious, and you mentioned, you know, being more transparent about different things, but I'm curious in what ways within yourself or outward have you found that you've been untrue?
Well, yeah, so in what ways, my objective, my commitment for the next 4 years is to speak only the truth and not tell a lie. So in which ways have I been untrue? Well, if you want to really dive into that, I just did a 9-part truth series on that I put on my YouTube channel, which shares everything that I had been hiding, guarding, anything I'd been embarrassed. Andrew watched some of it, right? And so I dive really deep into that. But to give a little bit of a summary, my sexual past, you know, there were a handful of sexual experiences that I had that were not consensual or not fully consensual, that I felt a lot of pain over, and that others felt pain over, that I wasn't sharing. So my financial past, you know, just sharing my dealings with finances. I used to steal a lot of stuff. You know, it was kind of my way when I was younger of sort of damning the man, I would say. But there was also just a bit of just taking. I wasn't taking from individuals though, so it always really was just a taking from the mega corporations mostly. And then, you know, there's just so many things that I've had to be very selective of what I share as a human being who part of me doesn't care what people think about me at all. But part of me cares greatly. And the part of me that cares greatly is that my job is to share messages in a way that result in people hearing them and then wanting to transform their lives. My objective is for people to radically transform their lives. My objective is also to help people make small changes, but ultimately I'm here to light fires inside of people that will radically transform their lives. If people are going to listen to me and transform their lives, they're going to have to like me, not dislike me, most likely. How often do you dislike someone and then are inspired and motivated to do what they're saying? It's not really how it generally works with humans. They have to feel a connection to you and a liking for you in some way. And so it's an interesting thing that I've been selective of what I share, because knowing what people have the desire to hear and what they would be like, well, that's just too much, man. So just to give you one, small example, I shared this in my truth series, but like I have this pot and it's my only pot and I cook in it and I make tea from it, but I also pooped in it once because I was in the Everglades and I had diarrhea and I didn't want to go out of the tent because the biting insects are so bad out there. So I pooped in this pot. Now, what I realized when I realized I was going to do this releasing of everything is that other people have eaten from that pot. Not something you want to tell people, even though it's totally clean. The pot was totally clean, but I'm talking about truth in the sense of sharing everything you would be embarrassed to share or everything that people would cancel you for. And in our society, you can become canceled for so much, so easily. And so, from little things to, really substantial things that I really mourned. Like I said, I grew up in a time where I had never heard the word consensuality. And I asked numerous of my best friends growing up. There was no discussion of consensuality. We didn't, and the women didn't know about consensuality either that we were interacting with. Neither of us knew our boundaries. Like, a lot of us, some did. So but to share the nuance of that in a society that is so often, just wants to create labels, it's very hard. And so being just so vulnerable about these things has been very challenging. So those are a few things. Also working with the Discovery Channel, like working with TV, my experience with that is another thing that I shared a lot of truths on. And of course, if someone says to me, do I look pretty? Now for me, that's easy. I have no issue whatsoever because I don't believe in the concept of pretty and ugly anymore. So my teacher, Steve Torma, who teaches nonviolent communication, he put this so poignantly for me. He said, there is no such thing as a chunk of ugly that can fall from the sky into your eye. Ugly is in your mind. It's purely in your mind. So if someone says to me, do I look pretty? I'm not thinking about whether they look pretty. So what I can say to them is just simply, I'm enjoying being in your presence. I don't have to acknowledge this concept of pretty or ugly. And I'm not sidestepping it in the sense that I'm not going to tell a white lie. And I'm just not entering into these societal structures or ways of being, and I can still operate from a place of full truth and integrity. The reason why is because I do enjoy their presence. I can genuinely, and what do they really want when they say, do I look pretty? They want to be seen, to be heard. They want to know they matter. And if I say, I'm so joyful to be in your presence, they're gonna get the same out of that, or most likely more, than hearing that they're pretty if it comes from a place of truth. So yeah. One or two more questions come to mind?
Of all the changes you've made, what's been the most liberating that you're most glad that you did?
I'm not someone that really does mosts because everything is so connected. Mm-hmm. Everything is so interconnected between, like I said, food, water, energy, waste, transportation, connection, community, money. I feel joy in so many ways. Like right now, one of the things that's most alive for me is the practice of universal love, which I'm starting to be able to really speak about from a place of feeling no uncomfort, in the sense that I just exist in a state of universal love for the most part. Whereas, 5 years ago, heck no, I couldn't have said that. I could have talked about the concept of it, but now I can say, in this moment, you saw when that helicopter went by. I loved that helicopter. I enjoyed its presence. When I'm sleeping here in Los Angeles right now, I hear the sirens and I hear the birds, and I love them both. I love this experience of humanity, and I love the experience of suffering, you know, like, and some people out there, you might be like, this guy loves suffering? What is he, a psychopath? But suffering is life. To not love it would be to be pushing away life. Suffering is inherently a part of life, therefore I am going to love it. So right now, what's feeling the most freeing is that, the choice to love everything. And that's definitely partly from Ram Dass. You know, I listened to 40 hours of Ram Dass on my walk from Canada down here. And he, one of the things that he says is, I am loving awareness. So I will walk down the street just saying, I am loving awareness. But really, that one resonates for me. But yeah, just saying, I love everything. And I just walk down the street and I say, I love the trees. I love this puke on the ground. I love this dog poop. Because there's something behind it that I love. And so, last little thing I'll add to that, almost synonymous to love for me is gratitude. Because do you ever hate something you're grateful for? Not really. Maybe. So love and gratitude are synonymous. Truth and integrity are synonymous. Integrity and love, now that I'm getting more into this practice, I see that they're all so interconnected. And so gratitude is, that over the last few years has been the biggest window. Along with that, another tie to gratitude is celebration of life. Like, where my relationship struggled the most in the last handful of years was the lack of celebration. Where whenever we would complete a task, you know, I've run a nonprofit for multiple years, and we would complete a task and I'd say, good, let's do the next one. Instead of celebrating what we had just done. And most all of my teammates have struggled with how little gratitude I've expressed and how little celebration of life I've expressed, I've embodied. And that's been the key magic to transforming my life to being a place of joy, is gratitude and celebration of life. I feel like that's a perfect place to say goodbye to you, dear friends. I hope that you enjoyed this time together and that you have taken some things out of this. If so, I highly encourage you to come up with a list of changes that you'd like to make. Make a list. You hang it up in your kitchen or on your fridge or wherever you'll see it every day, and try to make one positive change per week. If you're looking for some motivation, you can go to robingreenfield.org/100 and you'll see plenty there. And if you're looking for some really big changes, before I went offline 5 days ago, I wrote my top changes for making a substantial change in your life and the earth, and there's 16 changes in there, and that's robingreenfield.org/top changes. So that's where it's like, if you're looking for maybe a radical big change, those are some of the big ones. So we love you very much, dear friends, and we'll see you again soon.
Cutting.